Electricity meter manufacturers and assemblers in Nigeria are worried that about 40% or 40 of their members actually may fold up if the government goes ahead to open bids for the production of meters under the $155 million World Bank loan to Nigeria. At a media briefing in Abuja, the association opposed plans by the federal government to use the loan for the importation of electricity meters. The body claims that bids are about to be opened for both foreign and local manufacturers of meters and allege that the bid conditions favor foreign companies, while the manufacturers appealed to the government to step down the bid opening and allow local companies to participate actively in the production of meters in the interest of local economy, growth and employment.
That this World Bank project, we believe, is inimical to the growth of the manufacturing sector, is inimical to the progress that has been made in the local content policy as stated in Executive Order 003 of 2017, and also it negates the gains that have been made in backward integration, technology transfer. It is a loan being given by the World Bank to Nigeria, and a loan of $155 million for a bid of 5 lots for bids to be submitted locally and internationally. What then surprised our members was when the conditions of the bid came out. It was clear that the bid, all the performance bonds, the evaluation criteria by way of cash flow, by way of turnover, by way of experience, seemed to be designed to eliminate the local companies. We also observed that the package was such that the foreign companies were to bring in fully built meters. Remember, we manufacture and assemble meters here. We employ people, train them, build production capacity, training capacity.
We need to sit in the table. We need them to take the money and focus on catalyzing our own home economic growth. If you put the World Bank money on the meter manufacturers to handle this, it will do us good in our economy. What will happen is that if we put this money with local manufacturers, what will happen is that at least 60% of this money will be retained in Nigeria. But if you do tenders and give it to foreign companies, they will bring the meters, produce it, it will not add anything. Every day in every different factories, locations we have, people sit down and couple meters, get paid salary.
Before you here are companies that are going to fold, companies that are going to shut down if on Tuesday those tenders are opened. These companies cannot be sustained if tenders are opened on Tuesday. So I'm leaving here to Lagos on Tuesday if tenders are opened to tell my staff that their job have come.
All right, we have joining us to take a look at the issues and their implications for the economy. Director General, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, who joins us virtually from Lagos. And in our studio is Ogbonna, Ikuku, investment promotion expert. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us on News Night.
Thank you for coming.
Let's start with you, Segun Ajayi-Kadiri, the DG man, right there in Lagos. Thank you again for joining us. First off, I mean, a lot of people have been commending this, including the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, different bodies, NASIMA, LCCI, and what have you. But the question is, how will this, tax change, or changes, if you like, impact on manufacturing, or manufacturers like yourself?
Okay, so to create a context, I think the imposition of the excise itself did run against a government-approved roadmap that was set in the year 2022 and are programmed to run until 2024. So when it was introduced earlier in the year 2023, it completely put to rest all projections and plans of players in the sector. So the removal or the suspension of this excise escalation has brought a lot of relief to manufacturers. It then reconnect with their plans and projections for the year 2023 and going forward. It also means that government has restored its confidence that people should have in the pronouncement of government. It indicates that it is possible for government to obey its own rules, because inconsistency in government policies has been the bane of our economy, in fact, for a very long time now. So, I mean, government reversing itself, so to say, and indicating that going forward, there's going to be an engagement, full engagement of stakeholders in order to arrive at policy measures that will be beneficial to the economy, is a welcome development. And going forward, the clarity that we've not had, we are now able to settle down with government to have it. And we know that the revenue that government was seeking after when it unilaterally imposed those excise will now be better realized, because we are now going to have increased productivity. The capacity utilization of members will increase. They are now able to settle down to their projections, and then all the income that government is looking for from that sector will be realized.
That's all right. Thank you very much. You just told us about the impact of that on manufacturers. Ogbonna, let's come to you. We know that at the end of the day, when they talk about any tax regime, those who bear the final brunt are the consumers. Speak to us about the impact of this on the final consumers.
Now, what happened? It's been a very huge concern to us as experts when it comes to driving investment into Nigeria. First things first, if we're already paying 30%, tax, as corporate tax in Nigeria. So if you have this additional tax, being included into the tax that a company can pay, Nigeria becomes one of the, the highest countries, where where you pay the highest amount of tax, which is not very good, when it comes to competing with other countries, because investors are also driven by, in as much as efficiency in your system. They look at your tax regime. They look at the property, the property rights, and the rules, how issues are being sorted within your system. So within the ecosystem, if you are now beginning to impose more taxes on investors, it becomes a huge problem. And then at the end of the day, what happens is that most people now begin to transfer that to consumers. Every increase is transferred to consumers, and then you see disposable income in our nation is now, is not that much anymore, because a lot of families can't afford, because of the inflationary pressures that are, that have hit the country so massively. So, taking this decision, looking at it holistically, with the team that the president has put together, is actually a very welcome idea.
Back to you, Ajayi-Kadiri. A lot of people, of course, like yourself, continue to commend this government for coming up with this, but it's not, it's just a suspension. It's not like the government is doing away totally with taxes, because one thing that's certain are taxes and death. Now, what exactly is wrong with what President Buhari put in place? Is it just the fact that, people like yourself, Manufacturers Association, not enough consultation was done with stakeholders like yourself? Or is it essentially that these taxes really do damage to the manufacturing sector? And how much damage really?
It's all of those. First, there was, of course, no adequate consultation, and we take this suspension, meaning that it should not happen. Because, like I said, there's a subsisting 3-year roadmap set by government, being followed by all the stakeholders. So we take the suspension to mean that it will not happen, at least until the end of that roadmap. And this speaks to the integrity of government. We also see to the fact that the manufacturing sector is already overburdened. So this tax is not good. Well, you have mentioned it that the thing that is sure is death and tax. But there are some tax that are worse than death. And I think what you are going to do is, if you kill these industries that are in any way already paying taxes to 3 tiers of government, that are already saddled with the prevalent consumer apathy, all the economic factors that should have supported them are going negative. To add the tax to them is to just throw the last hammer that will nail the coffin. So we are saying that this particular one is bad tax and it should not be imposed. So we are looking to the suspension to mean that it will not come to this, at least until the end of the roadmap that has been set. For the consumer, ultimately, every manufacturer produces to make profit. That means you need to sell. For the final consumer, he's going to pay more, not when the disposable income of the average Nigerian is declining. And there are actually other very necessary measures that this administration has taken, but that have negatively impacted the disposable income of the average Nigerian. You can talk of the fuel subsidy removal. You can talk of the floating of the Naira rate. I mean, these are measures that are necessary, commendable, and relevant at this time, but they have their implications. We shouldn't compound those with consumption taxes that tends to complicate the matter, especially when there's a subsisting tax regime. So my take is that government will be better served in terms of its revenue accruals if this is permanently forsaken for now, and then we look forward to an expansion of the tax net that will be able to reflect the economy and ensure that those that are not inside the tax net and ought to be paying tax are brought in. Those are the things we should be looking at, and not complicating or making life more difficult for tax compliant citizens, as we have in the manufacturing sector and all the sectors that have been affected by this unwarranted escalation.
Ikuku, very quickly before Tolu asks his question. I mean, Tinubu has just set up a tax reform committee, and what do you make of the composition of this committee, and what are your expectations really? What do you think, what are you expecting this committee to come up with?
First, if you look at the person heading the committee, I mean, with his resume, you can see that he's someone who's been around. He's done this job for a very long time. So, and I also expect him, because I mean, the company he's coming from is a company that have done a lot of research for different companies, different sectors. So I think it's something that I know he's going to consult wide. I know he's going to have conversations with different stakeholders to make sure that whatever it is, whether we're going, this suspension we are going to bring it back, or I mean, there's going to be a better and more creative and innovative way to actually, get accruances for the nation, as against just, trying to burden manufacturers. But I mean, the mandate is quite clear, and the person that's put there as the head, suits the mandate. I think they'll be able to do a good job.
Okay. Now, Olusegun, let me come back to you. Are you still there? Now, while these tax breaks subsist, it's important for us to understand the advantage to manufacturers, and of course, let's now see what that means to consumers as well. Is that going to mean some form of honeymoon for consumers too?
Of course. I mean, because when this escalation was pronounced by government, manufacturers have started to do the calculations. I mean, I believe why we have not seen an escalation in price is because they are still holding some stock. And if you run out of stock, you will need to calculate your replacement cost, which will have been higher if you factor in the excise duty. So consumers have been saved this increase, and we can now look forward to a more regular flow of the whole value chain, from the manufacturer to the wholesaler and to the retailer, then to the consumer. So I think the government, President Tinubu's government, in reversing or suspending this action has actually affected both the manufacturers and the consumers and all the players that are involved in the value chain. It's going to bring a lot of relief. And we can, like I said, go back to the projections that we had before the year 2023. We can now go on with our plan, see how we could deal with other reform measures that the administration has brought in to position ourselves for competitiveness. I mean, don't forget that all of this is happening in the with the advent of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, where countries that surround Nigeria are actually priming up their processes so that they have market penetration. So now we are certain that with the plans that we've had and the resilience that has been inbuilt in the face of an inclement environment, we are able to continue with our strategies for penetrating the African market. So I think the decision of government is far-sighted and it has gone away from the rather myopic perception that you need to grab all you can grab now and then leave the future to take care of itself. Tax that you are imposing has to be in sync with your development objectives. And I think that this administration has just given thought by this action.
All right, Ogbonna, let me quickly come to you. I mean, still around the issue of taxes, but deviate a little. I mean, we're hearing from the Inland Revenue Service, if this is anything to go by, that there's a plan to introduce a VAT, value-added tax, for the informal sector. How really desirable or how necessary do you think this is? And I'd like to get your comment on the manufacturers there who are concerned about the importation of meters based on the World Bank loan of $155 million.
Okay, let me start from the manufacturers. Right. First things first, if their ability to provide the same services that those companies who are going to bring in these things from offshore, I mean, if it's commensurate, if they're able to meet up with the target, I mean, being able to manufacture the quantity that is required, of course, we should patronize, because, I mean, going by our local content laws, we should patronize our local manufacturers. But first things first, everything about manufacturing, everything about supply chain there has to be an efficiency, the denominator has to be the efficiency that exists within those, the ecosystem. So we need to interrogate this further, find out from them if they have the capacity to, deploy, why not? But again, this goes to show that we need to also interrogate further to find out if the financial engineering that was structured within the World Bank loan that is coming, if it was designed for importation, then maybe we should have to renegotiate, because I mean, these are things that we can do, because I mean, if you sit down with the fiscal measures and the things we need to jumpstart our economy at this point, we shouldn't encourage those kind of things happening right now. So I think that would be that for now. Right. But then coming back to the issue of the consumers, and then what happens to them with the VAT. Now, whether we like it or not, for the informal sector. Yeah. Now, if you see, until we have a structured tax system in Nigeria, which I think the committee also, with this, I mean, the part of their terms of reference to make sure that we have an efficient tax system. And then, if you look at it, if you have an efficient tax system, some of these recommendations will come out. If we need to tax the informal sector, VAT. Now, I think, from my own opinion, is actually a realistic one. It's something that should happen, but we need to look at what are those services that we should tax, when it comes to the informal sector. So, I mean, there has to be a complete X-ray. We need to look at it properly. The team should be left to do their work. I don't know how much time they have to do this work. I mean, if you look at countries like Norway, where they have, the tax system is well structured. The entire 70% of their accruances come from just 40 people in the entire nation. And you see the efficiency because everybody they're deploying technology. They're making sure that no interferences when it comes to the political leadership interfering with the work that they do. And if you see how robust when it comes to their budgeting, the budgeting is so robust because they have enough accuracy that they push back into infrastructure, into the healthcare sector, into education when in making their country a more developed economy.
We'll have to leave it there, gentlemen. Ogbonna Ikuku is investment promotion expert joining us here in the studio, and Segun Ajayi-Kadiri is the DG Manufacturers Association of Nigeria joining us from Lagos.